Now that I finally got my hands on the War of Cetra's Fury Arcane Journal, I can put together a Renegade Crowns list. And while I have a lot of problems with both the book and both the composition of the Renegade Crowns list, I still think you can put together a fun narrative list with this army. I'm using the same guidelines I always do, but to summarize very quickly, this is an escalation guide, meaning we're going to start at lists at 500 points and grow them to 2000 points. They aren't meant to be hyper competitive and completely min-max, but I do want them to be able to hold their own in a casual setting. In addition, now that I'm building a Renegade Crowns list, I want to really lean into the theme, and I want to make use of some mercenary units as part of this. So let's get going with our 500 point list. At 500 points, we take a boys before heroes mentality and we invest very little into our heroes, instead opting for as many models as possible. For our general at 500 points, I'm taking an outcast wizard and I'm not bothering to invest in any of the special options for Renegade Crowns, at least not yet. I'm running battle magic here just because I feel like this list needs more killing power and I really want to get Pillar of Fire. At 500 points, obviously that's not guaranteed, but as these lists grow, we're going to end up with a lore familiar. The most important unit in our core, at least at this point, is going to be our sellsword infantry. Infantry is probably the strongest aspect of the Renegade Crowns game, but they aren't necessarily good at running over the enemy unit. They're good at sustained combat. They're good at static combat resolution. That's why we're going with thrusting spears and shields over halberds. We are adding outriders to this core, and at 500 points, they aren't a major part of this list. They're basically good at harassing for some range damage. But as these lists grow, this unit will be more and more important. For our last unit, we add the sellsword infantry, this time focused on crossbows, and this is going to give us a ranged vector of attack. What we are hoping to do here, what we are trying to do, is to grind down our opponent either through magic or through some of these ranged attacks, and so hopefully our infantry group can break them. But I admit there's no real hammer to this list. In fact, that is a big problem I have with Renegade Crowns. A lot of anvils, no hammers. Winning with this army is going to depend a lot on holding objectives, grinding down opponent units through static combat resolution, and basically winning close games. It is not a newbie-friendly army, and at 500 points it's really rough, but things do get a little bit better at 1000 points because we have more options. And at this point level, we can start to apply our Renegade Crown bonuses. Our wizard remains the general, and we're going to invest a little bit into him. We make him level 2 so he knows more spells, and we're also paying for the lore familiar so we can pick our spells. But we are also giving him a throwaway Renegade's Crowns trait so we can have a phalanx in our core. And our other hero, our Renegade Captain, combos into it. We make him a noble outlaw so he can hold the Griffin standard. And combine that with the phalanx, we have a unit with very strong static combat resolution. It's probably the best combo Renegade Crowns has. Next, we have our veteran free blades. And these are kind of a strange unit, but think of them a lot like an Empire Knight. But you have the option to cheap out on their armor and make them cheaper. This unit is objectively the hardest hitter, or at least it can be kitted out to be the hardest hitter in the standard list. We don't have the points to fully kit it out now, so we make do with what we have. But we basically want it to charge at weak opponents or combo charge their strong opponents. For the last unit in our 1000 point list, we have our Border Princess Bombard. The Renegade Crowns list doesn't have a lot of options of dealing with anything larger than a horse, which is a really big problem in our current meta. And that makes running the Bombard, or 2 at a 2000 point level, pretty essential even at a very casual level. At 1500 points, we're going to add a prince and flesh out the options we already have. These Renegade Crowns seem cheap on paper, but they're really point starved once you start adding in the necessary add-ons and additions. I added a prince to our heroes list, but we really can't afford to kit him out yet. But even bare bones as he is, he'll really help our veteran free blades. I've upgraded our sellswords to veteran sellswords, but at least for right now, we had to pull back on the thrusting spears and give them just hand weapons and shields. Not the hugest deal because a lot of their power comes from their static combat resolution anyways. I've invested into the outriders to make them a lot more deadly than they were before. Basically, now that they are an ambush unit, we use them to sneak into our opponent's back line and take out their artillery and other fragile units. Worst case scenario, because you have an ambusher unit your opponent has to account for, it will relieve some pressure from your front lines. We also add some more bodies to our crossbows so they can throw out more bolt, and we invest heavily into our Empire Knights, or well, our basic stand-in for Empire Knights, and try to make them as deadly as we possibly can. They now have access to the Lance formation, but do keep in mind that the Lance is not necessarily always the best choice. Sometimes it's better to just attack from a regular line formation. Our last new unit here is the Doomseeker Mercenary. We're also giving him the Rune of Wrath to give him an extra attack. A fragile unit to be sure, but do keep in mind that your opponent doesn't really benefit from killing it in victory points. These crowns list have very little in killy units, and so we're going to make the best of it with this Doomseeker. Basically, try to keep this guy screened from ranged attacks, and then when the opportunity presents itself, use him to countercharge. He is an okay unit in this current configuration, but the way we're using him in 2000 points will make him quite deadly indeed. At 2000 points, I try to bring in all the tricks I can think of to help this list grind it out. Access to a steam tank or demigriff riders or even just some Pegasus mounts would really help a lot, but we don't have that with this list, so we make do with what we have. We make the wizard level 3, we give him Halor Familiar, we stick with battle magic, and we try to pick the deadliest spells. I highly recommend taking Fireball and Pillar of Fire here, and then the other spell, whatever you choose. Our captain remains untouched, we just want him to rock that banner, that's what we need him for. The prince is where we do a little bit more investing. I gave him the giant blade, I gave him an upgrade in armor, and I gave him the Ruby Ring of Ruin to try to make him as killy as possible. We need the unit of the veteran Freeblades to do as much damage as humanly possible. In our core, we are invested heavily into our veteran Phalanx. We give them the thrusting spears again and boosted them up to 40 bodies. With the Phalanx rule and the Griffin banner and all the bodies in here, this unit should be able to go toe to toe with any other block in the game. To fit in other things into this list, I had to drop one of the models off of the Freeblades unit. But they will still have 6 models with the prince in them, and we're also giving them the war banner to help that combat resolution just a little bit higher. I've also added a second bombard to this list. Ideally, I'd like to be able to put an organ gun here, I just feel like they're thematic to the list. But just with the weaknesses the Renegade Crowns have, I don't think you could really run this list at a 2000 point level without 2 bombards. It just doesn't have enough ways to counter monsters, to counter large mounts and dragons. For our friendly Doomseeker, I've also given him the Master Rune of Alaric the Mad. And this is going to turn him into a blender. A fragile blender, but a blender indeed. If you can keep this dwarf from getting shot off the table, and protect him so he could side charge other units, he will blend through most everything your opponent has to throw at him. Obviously, this is easier said than done, and if you have an opponent that recognizes how much damage this Doomseeker can do, he's going to make it a priority to take off the board. But if you succeed, you'll see this dwarf rip through cavalry, through monsters, even a Green Knight. Our last new unit are the Imperial Ogres, and I'll be honest with you, the only reason I added them is for thematic reasons. I don't feel like it's really a Renegade Crowns list without ogres of some kind. But that's not to say they're a bad unit. They can anchor a side of your line, or they can also do a lot of damage on a countercharge. And we don't have a lot of heavy hitters in our list, so these great weapons could come in very handy down the line. So that's what I've come up with for Renegade Crowns. Obviously, this is a very new list, a very new army at this point, and nerds haven't quite wrapped their heads around it. It's possible down the line someone will find a very broken way to play them. But as of 1 week past the release date, I feel like this is an army that is great for modeling, it's great for narrative play to tell stories, but is not great on the tabletop. It's probably the weakest officially supported list in the game. Winning is going to come down to avoiding the awful flying units of your opponent, holding objectives, and grinding out very close wins. But if you feel differently, and if you feel like there's untapped potential in this list that I'm unaware of, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you found this helpful, And as always, thanks for watching.